The UK's two major political parties are, for example, fighting hard for the East London town of Romford. But some voters there are fed up with broken promises, also lacking in faith in politicians, and considering a vote for the election's wildcard, Nigel Farage's Reform UK. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's Conservatives are trailing the centre-left Labour Party by around 20 points in national polls ahead of the July 4th election. Reform's rising popularity threatens to split the centre-right vote. Romford has voted Conservative in every election since 2001, but this time a much closer fight is predicted between the Conservatives and Keir Starmer's opposition Labour Party. Voters Reuters spoke to at a busy Friday market in the city centre selling everything from plants to handbags named a range of issues they cared about most, including immigration, healthcare and the cost of living. Only Sunak or Starmer have a realistic chance of becoming Prime Minister, but the surprise return of prominent Brexit campaigner Farage, a right-wing populist, to the forefront of politics has caused many to rethink their voting decision. "You don't know who to believe," said Jacqueline Harry when asked which party campaign promises appealed to her. "It's about trusting if they are actually going to do it," she said. And retired factory worker Harry said the country was in a mess. She didn't trust the Conservatives and wanted change. She is usually a Labour voter, but she fears her vote could be wasted. "We like what he says, but is that enough?" she said. A poll published last week found that public trust in government has fallen to a record low, with 45% of respondents almost never trusting the government to put the needs of the nation above the interests of their own party. I mentioned this before this week. The Reform Party, formerly the Brexit Party, has gained in the polls since Farage took the leadership and announced he would run for Parliament, overtaking the Conservatives for the first time last week's Thursday, according to a poll. The development is a sign that a Conservative election campaign marked by missteps has left voters ripe for Farage, a former commodities trader who portrays himself as a man of the people against an out-of-touch political elite. I always look at the manifesto. I like to stick to it, but I think Nigel Farage summed it up on the news this morning when he said the manifesto stands for lies. That was said by pensioner Barry Couchman, who used to work for a water company. Couchman supported the Conservatives in the last election, but he said he felt the country needed change, and this time he didn't know who to vote for. His wife wants to vote for reform, and he indeed is impressed by Farage's style. "He just speaks from the gut," he said. The reform candidate is unlikely to win in Romford. As in most seats across the country, the party has enough support to become second or third, but Britain has indeed a first-past-the-post system. In March, a prominent former Conservative deputy leader who had been suspended on allegations of Islamophobia defected to Reform, given the party its first MP. The Conservatives responded to Farage's advance by warning that Starmer could get a huge majority if people vote for anyone but them, a warning that resonated with some in Romford at least. "I want to vote for the Conservatives, but I also like the Reform Party. I agree with everything they say, but I'm afraid my vote will be wasted," said Karen Webb, a market trader. "If I vote for them, the Conservatives are not elected because more people vote Labour. That's my biggest worry." Well, despite slight declines, the Labour Party is indeed unchallenged on course for victory. But how will the Tories react? Do the right-wing Reform Party and the Liberal Democrats have a chance at all? At the halfway point of the election campaign, the Labour Party is presenting itself in a very relaxed and extremely presidential manner, as far as that is possible in the British monarchy, of course. When presenting the manifesto for the coming legislative period, Starmer appeared in front of the audience in Manchester in his shirt sleeves last week. The 132-page A5 format booklet bears not only the single word change, but also the portrait of Starmer, who looks to the future with vision, again in shirt sleeves. Anyone who leaves through the 9 tasks listed, from economic growth to health reforms, will see Starmer a further 33 times. He understands the widespread cynicism of the population, said the former chief prosecutor, but I reject it. We are presenting a program of hope for change and increasing prosperity. Starmer expressly rejected the media accusation that he was boring. After all, he does not want to become a ringmaster but prime minister. The manifesto contains good diagnoses of the existing, sometimes serious problems, from the lack of teachers to the long waiting lists in the NHS health system to the overcrowding of the outdated prisons. That was said by Sam Friedman of the Institute for Government Studies, IFG, analyzing the situation. But where does the money come from for the targeted reforms? How are the electorate acting here? Well, we know this, waiting and distant. Starmer had to endure the derisive laughter from the TV audience for his campaign phrases that were repeated too often. My father was a toolmaker, my mother was a nurse, and so on and so on. But Prime Minister Sunak suffers a similar fate whenever he talks about his compassion for normal people. The former hedge fund manager and husband of a billionaire businesswoman has the enormous family fortune hanging around his neck like a millstone. And in addition, the British apparently hold a lasting grudge against him for skipping the international commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the D-Day last week. In the polls, the Tories have fallen from an average of 24 to a miserable 18%. And we've seen that between 18 and 20% last week in polls. And in addition, the gap to the reform movement of Brexit campaigner Nigel Farage has narrowed in some polls from between, they are on Tories 20, them 16, but there is even a poll with reform ahead of the Tories with 19 to 18, which Farage triumphantly pointed out in the most recent TV debate. We are now the real opposition to Labour, he said. And the Labour Party has also recently lost 3 points, but the gap to the Tories remains unchanged. Because of the majority voting system in force on the island, this is much more decisive than the percentage values, which are also distorted by all those who refuse to give the pollsters information. The shy Tories are notorious in this regard, having already caused disastrous incorrect analyses by the polling companies in 92 and 15. But how are the Tories reacting to the rising poll ratings for Farage's reform movement? With a mixture of panic and ingratiation. Farage is actually a good conservative, claims former Home Secretary Suella Braverman from the extreme right wing, who was fired by Sunak. The national populist and Trump fan accuses the Tories of lying at every opportunity and makes no secret of his ambition to destroy the Conservatives. Officially, prominent Tories such as former party leader Michael Howard are still encouraging their own camp. It's like football, a halftime result rarely lasts. In the door-to-door election campaign, however, even cabinet members are already admitting that they have lost the election and are only campaigning to at least send the respective local MPs back to the House of Commons. Depending on the projection of the previous polls, the new faction there could shrink from 365 to 170 or even just 66 seats. But what do the parties say about taxes and levies in the coming years? Far too little and far too little realistic, at least complain the experts. Both the Tories and Labour have ruled out increases in income tax and VAT, as well as pension contributions for the coming years. This has tied its hands too much for the opposition party in particular, believes IFG chief economist Gemma Tetlow. Labour's focus on stimulating the currently stagnating economy is right, but the state investments in sustainable energy supplies required to achieve this are not enough. And the highly respected Institute for Fiscal Studies believes that the planned Tory tax cuts of £17 billion are hardly achievable, and if so, only through saving in both investments and the daily running of schools and hospitals. So that would be another devastating blow to the public. But if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.